So in today's lecture, I will not introduce any more new content, but I will try to combine all of the methods we learned over the previous weeks by showing you how to replicate one simple paper. The paper I chose is called Promoting Healthy Choices, Information versus Convenience by Jessica Wisdom, Julie S. Downs, and George Liebenstein. And the paper is about interventions that help people choose healthier options in a fast food restaurant. And the main goal of the paper is kind of to compare these measures that were issued by many states in the US that restaurants have to provide calorie information on their menus, and then they compare how the effectiveness of these measures to a behavioral approach where they make choosing healthier options more convenient by promoting them in the front of the menu versus promoting unhealthy options. And so kind of the motivation of the paper is that in the US, a lot of measures have been implemented that require fast food chains and producers of food to label all the nutritional contents of their meals, so already in 1994, but it hasn't been thoroughly evaluated about how effective this is in actually making people choose healthier meals. And then they kind of contrast this with a second approach which they call asymmetric paternalism, which means that steering consumers to healthier choices without actually restricting their options. So instead of only giving people a menu with healthy choices, you acknowledge that people are kind of limited in their attention, and you just try to make these healthy choices more salient by putting them up front, or maybe labeling them with like green color or so, without having to limit the freedom of choice in any ways. So the paper kind of reports the results from two studies, and both of them have a similar intervention. They just slightly differ in the way they implement those interventions. Both of these papers have interventions where they provide more or less information about calorie content. They provide information about recommended calorie intake, and then both of them also have a treatment where healthier options were shown as kind of the default option, and in order to get an unhealthy sandwich, you had to go through the menu and actually actively look for the unhealthy choices. And the kind of the main motivation here for this treatment is that there have already been experiments on changing the default in retirement savings accounts, for example, that has been shown to be very effective. So they think that giving people a default option that is healthier will also be effective, because people will not want to have the additional cognitive effort of looking through the menu and actively choosing an unhealthy option. So the method is that people randomly chosen in a fast food chain, and they were offered a free meal if they choose from a menu that was given to them. And the menus had just different variation of how the food was presented. So there were two different treatments regarding the recommended calorie intake. So one menu had printed what is the recommended calorie intake for a person with a sedentary lifestyle. Another one had calorie information for each of the menu items. And a third treatment would show healthy options up front and unhealthy ones in the back, or the opposite, having unhealthy sandwiches in the front and the healthier ones in the back. And of course, for each of them, they have a treatment and a control group where they do not show this information, or where they have the neither unhealthy nor healthy menus in the front, but rather a mixed set of sandwiches. Now, the two studies kind of differ just in the way that they implement the asymmetric paternalism treatment, where the first one has this featured, as they call it, sandwiches that make them look like these are kind of special offers in the front. and the other study makes it just very convenient to choose the healthy ones, but where you just have to like check a box. But rather, if you want to have non-healthy options, you actually have to look up the name and write down the name of the sandwich that you want to have on your order, and then you hand in your order. But kind of common to them is in both of them, the idea is that it should be more convenient to choose something healthy rather than something unhealthy. The last piece of the study is that the customers also complete a survey afterwards where they were asked what they guess is the daily recommended intake in calories for a person of a comparable lifestyle to theirs. And they also have to estimate the calorie content of the sandwich they're choosing. They use this information kind of to see whether the providing information actually helps people to kind of narrow down to reduce the error in their estimates. And this is kind of helpful to understand if it's simply that if whether people are simply lacking information about what healthy options are supposed to look like, or whether there are other mechanisms that people that make people choose unhealthy options. For example, if unhealthy options are just always cheaper than the healthy options, then just providing information will not do anything because people just go with the cheapest menu. We can skip the participants part. So let's straight go to the results. And the first table that we're going to replicate is simply a comparison where they just take the two studies, and then each of them, they compare the total calories consumed by a customer, and then they regress this on whether or not the person was in a treatment where they were given calorie information, and on a covariate where whether or not the featured menu was a healthy menu or an unhealthy menu. And we can go through table 1, which is kind of the first and the main analysis. And here you can see we have the regression for study 1, for study 2, and then we have the two studies combined as a third regression. And they all have the same regression specification, just that the combined study has an additional interaction term for whether they were in study 2 with a healthy menu or an unhealthy menu. But all of them feature a dummy variable for whether or not information was provided, for whether or not daily calorie accommodation was provided, for whether the featured menu was healthy, whether it was unhealthy. And you can see, since we have a dummy for both healthy and unhealthy, the reference group is a mixed menu that is neither specifically unhealthy nor specifically healthy. And then they also have controls for being female, age, or being African American. And we can see here that the results seem kind of, at least the significance of these treatments seem to be kind of erratic. In study 2, calorie information provided reduces the average calorie consumed by about 70. But otherwise, it seemed to be the strongest predictors of consuming less calories is whether or not you're female, or more calorie if you're African American. And it doesn't seem like the interventions are kind of consistently reducing calorie intake by a significant amount. Also note that there is another regression result hidden here in the note, and this is the effect of healthy menu across studies without interaction. So what this means is that they ran this third regression here once again, but then they left out these interactions and they just reported the coefficient for having a healthy featured menu here, which their estimate is -24, but it's not significant. So then in a second step, the authors look at what are the mechanisms? Like, is it, are people, for example, just reducing calories on the side dishes, or are they choosing low calorie main dishes like the sandwich, or choosing low calorie sandwiches? Or is it, or they're not doing any of those? And so the first one is that they just look at how does the intervention affect the probability of choosing a healthy sandwich? And this is what I've highlighted here, the last line, that the convenience manipulation had its strongest effect on sandwich choice. And here we're going to look at the figure. This is figure 2. And here we can see that they just look at whether or not people with a healthy menu are more likely to choose the healthy sandwich because it's more convenient. And it seems like it really this has a strong impact here, that having a healthy menu presented makes you much more likely to choose a low-calorie sandwich whereas an unhealthy. The probability of choosing a low-calorie sandwich is less than 50%. And as I already mentioned, they also have a kind of as a second part of the mechanism what they look at, like what drives these results that they see regarding calories. They also had a survey where they asked people about what they guess is the recommended daily intake for an adult with a sedentary lifestyle. And they also asked them, what do you guess, how much calorie does the sandwich you chose contains? And then they look at all of these. They for each person, they calculate the difference of like how much was their guess wrong. And then they see whether providing the information about calorie actually reduces the error in their estimate of what is the daily recommended intake versus their guess, and also what is the actual amount of calorie in the sandwich they chose versus what they guessed. So it's kind of they're just checking, do people actually pay attention to what is written on the menu? And we see this in this table 4 here, where they have the same regression, and they just switch the dependent variable for each of these 5 regressions. So first they regress the estimated minus the actual daily recommended calorie intake, and then regress it on these 4 different treatments, like calorie information, calorie recommendation, healthy featured menu, or unhealthy featured menu. And then they take the absolute value of this difference. They estimate the calorie of the meals that they chose, and then the absolute meal calorie. And finally, they ask them in the survey whether the person actually considers calorie at all when choosing a meal, whether this is like kind of a variable to take into account when making their decision. And I think it's kind of interesting to see that none of these treatments seem to have a persistent effect on the error they make in guessing the calorie, either recommendation or actual calorie of their sandwich. So it seems like not, the lack of information does not seem to be what is driving people's unhealthy sandwich choices. So in the actual replication, I'm going to replicate these 2 tables and this 1 figure that I talked about. And if you're interested in the rest of the paper, then I recommend that you take a look and read up on the other analysis that they're also presenting. But I'm now going to replicate table 1, this one here, where just look at the total calorie intake, figure 2, and table 4.